Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of AKP Sports Talk. It's Wednesday. It's the day before the beginning of the NFL season. It's been a long, long journey from Super Bowl, what was that, 55 or whatever in Los Angeles back in February to the mark of a new season. But we're going to get all into the NFL tomorrow as the kickoff. But Ari, look, we've already had all our most pretty much every single FBS team playing college football. How was your weekend seeing your Arizona Wildcats play?
Yeah, it was good. It was definitely like I thought that they were gonna win, but I didn't think that they're gonna put up 40 points. It was definitely refreshing to see an offense that can move the ball, unlike the last two seasons, struggling to even score two touchdowns in a single game. So it was definitely good, and there's a lot of other really, really good games, not capped off by, but almost the last game of the LSU Florida State game that came down to the last early seconds. But yeah, there's a lot of other great games as well. What about you this past weekend?
Yeah, we're not going to get into my Cougars right now, but yeah, you mentioned it. Saturday was a very fantastic game. I mean, look, that UNC Appalachian State game, that was crazy. Appalachian State putting up 40 points in the fourth quarter. I mean, that's just college football. You had NC State avoiding the upset against Eastern Carolina, which should not have happened. But two missed kicks. What are you going to do there? I mean, Georgia, good Lord, they beat the brakes off of Oregon. Yeah, definitely an interesting week one. We definitely saw some contenders. Also, Utah versus Florida, one of the games of the week. Sad ending for Cam Rising, driving down, trying to complete the comeback, but interception in the end zone off of a bad read. That linebacker was just sliding over. So, but hey, that's college football for you. And here we are, we're heading into week two, and we even have some, I would say, better games this week after a pretty impressive week one. And let's just get right into it. Let's go right into that first one that where game day's going. Bama versus Texas. This is one that was circled on the calendar for a lot of Texas fans. Obviously, Texas is not, as impressive talently in terms of talent this year, but they do have Quinn Ewers, one number one recruit quarterback. Then you have Bijan Robinson, one of the highest, in fact, the highest running back pretty much I would say consistent number one running back in football right now. They're coming off an impressive 52-10 win against. I mean, it's University of Louisiana Monroe, so it's like, is it really impressive? We saw Quinn Ewers get picked off in his first game. Threw a couple touchdowns. Bijan Robinson scored, but now you're playing the best team in the country. You have Nick Saban and the Alabama crew coming for a big game on Saturday. Right now, the line is Alabama minus 20, so they think Alabama is going to make this not even close by three touchdowns. Over under is about 65.5. So definitely a high scoring game with Texas offense, along with Bryce Young and what he's done with that Alabama offense after their week one rout against Utah State. Ari, what are you taking here? This is a big time matchup this weekend. What do you like from both teams?
Yeah, I mean, the question all offseason was, if Texas is back with all these recruits and then bringing back Bijan Robinson and all that. And so, both teams cruised to easy wins over, smaller schools to open. And now this is the really true first test for Texas to see if they're, truly back to what they once were as a college football, team and program. We saw Ewers looked pretty good, for the most part last week. But again, taking with a grain of salt, given the opponent, and now you have Alabama, and that vaunted defense that you have to go up against. So I think it will definitely be a good early season test for Texas to see, how good they truly are this season. I think that even if they lose, respectively, not by 20 plus like the spread is, I think, you can consider it quote unquote good for Texas that they're even competitive with a team like Alabama. I don't think, obviously, you want to win every single game, but I don't think winning is the end all be all for this to be a good result for Texas, for the moving forward for the rest of the season. I mean, I'm still riding with Alabama. If I don't think I'm going to really put any bets on this game. If my lean, I think, would still be Alabama covering the spread because I still need to kind of see it from Texas before I'm going to, whereas we've seen it from Alabama for however many years. So, I mean, honestly, it might even just be a good bet just to go the over in this game because, even though Alabama has a really good defense, I still think Texas is going to put points on the board. I could see it being a game like in the 40s to the 20s, something like that, which is, I guess, right around where the over-under set at. So it's probably going to be pretty close to the line, is what I would guess. But, I mean, it's definitely going to be a good test for Texas to see where they're at. And like I said, I don't think they need to win the game necessarily for it to be a good result to see how they're going to do the rest of the season.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I feel like, look, this is the game a lot of Texas fans have been circling because this is the biggest test you can basically have. The number one team in the country coming to your town, and they've said that we want Bama and all this stuff, but when it really comes, we're going to see how Texas is because obviously, Bama has stars. We know that. But this Texas team has always been claiming that they're back ever since Sam Ehlinger led them to a Sugar Bowl appearance. And, well, we haven't seen them back since. So I feel like if Texas is really back, I feel like this is the big test for them. You mentioned, I feel like this game is definitely going to be a lot more high scoring in terms of how Alabama, completely shut out Utah State last week. I feel like Alabama's going to but Texas is going to get a lot more scoring opportunities. I don't think Texas is going to win, though. I mean, even though Austin's going to be rocking, I don't think Alabama is going to be phased going into that environment. I feel like Alabama is playing like the number one team in the country for a reason. Nick Saban's been doing this for years. I feel like Alabama's going to win. That's pretty much a lock, but I think it's going to be an interesting game. I hope to see, Gus Johnson on the call because that game is on Fox. So, he'll be electric tomorrow. No, not tomorrow. He'll be electric on Saturday for that matchup in Austin, and that's in the 9 a.m. slot. That's going to be a good game. Another one that I want to talk about, it's kind of personal, but it is still a good game. Wazoo versus Wisconsin. This game's right after that Bama-Texas game on Saturday. And I'm not going to be objective, but WSU obviously really, really poor game offensively last week against Idaho. Just could not really mesh well. They had three fumbles on offense by three different players. The defense still looked good, tackling, 7 sacks against Idaho's front line. But look, I mean, when you have guys like Braylon Allen, in the backfield for Wisconsin, that definitely is a cheat code pretty much for this Wisconsin team. Right now, Wisconsin's a minus 17.5 favorite. So a little bit of a less spread, but, still I feel like this Wazoo team could potentially do some damage here. But at the same time, I don't think it's going to be, anything to really note about here. But Ari, obviously this is kind of not a huge matchup, but still pretty big for, both schools facing, Power 5, best top tier talent. You have Wisconsin who, they came off a shutout but it's against Illinois State, but in a game where the offense was, didn't really need to do all that, but did just enough, carried by Braylon Allen to win them the game. And then you have Wazoo, who's coming off a gritty win against Idaho team that may actually be good in the Big Sky. I don't know. But, Wazoo coming off a win at home, first win of the season, now going into their biggest test, going to Madison, Wisconsin. Ari, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, no, I wasn't able to watch the whole Washington State game. I watched maybe half of it. But definitely wasn't what I expected them to look like. I know there is a lot of kind of hype with Ward coming from Incarnate Ward was. So I mean, and this is a true road game in Wisconsin, correct? I think, yeah. So it's definitely going to be a very tough environment after because they were in Pullman. Yeah, they were in Pullman because you were there. They were in Pullman this past weekend, so definitely not liking the feeling for Washington State. But I mean, hopefully they can at least make it at least somewhat competitive, but I don't know, I feel like they might lose by 20 plus in this one with the spread being 17. But hopefully, hopefully they can put up a better offensive test because I don't think their defense is going to be stopping the Wisconsin's offense. I don't think so. Hopefully their offense can do some, at least make it more competitive than what most might think. But definitely going to need to see more from the Cougars offense to kind of feel confident in them.
Yeah, definitely. One of the more interesting notes is just last game for Wazoo. They rely so heavily on the offense, but yet the defense kind of won them the game, and that's definitely kind of that transition on how this team is playing right now. But you mentioned it. Pullman is not Madison, Wisconsin. Madison is a bigger challenge itself. I mean, Camp Randall is one of the more electric, energetic places to play college football, and if you're a road team, boy, is it really hard to win there. So I definitely agree with you. It's going to be a really big uphill challenge for, a young team led by a sophomore quarterback. But I feel like, the Cougars are definitely going to score. I feel like that offense could produce, especially with Wisconsin coming off of Illinois State, really didn't get to see any true talent there. So I feel like this is definitely a big game for both programs. Wisconsin trying to, win the Big Ten West before in 2 weeks they play a good Ohio State team, and then you have Washington State, trying to, fight to be bowl eligible this year. That's a lot of people are saying about a 6-6, maybe a 7-5 record for this Washington State team. So, and also competing in the Pac-12 because obviously, you have next week, for example, I know that University of Washington's playing Michigan State, so another Big Ten Pac-12 game, and definitely just trying to kind of even especially after a Pac-12 week where we saw Utah lose to a non-conference, we saw Oregon get routed by a non-conference. It's just it's a back-to-back here. Obviously, a big win against a big program and a big conference like the Big Ten. Definitely would be a good win for a Wazoo team. So definitely would love to see how that one will work out. Hopefully WSU wins, but obviously that's personal. So I can't get my personal biases come in here. But the next game we're going to look at is an intriguing game, in my opinion, and it's between Tennessee and Pitt. And, Tennessee, they come off a win, but, it was against Ball State. But, Hendon Hooker, he looked pretty impressive. He went, I think he threw 18 of 25 for a little over 220 passing yards and a couple TDs. And now entering the top 25 after being outside looking in. They go to Pittsburgh. Obviously, Pitt coming off the backyard brawl against West Virginia. Keaton Slovis, not the most impressive game, but he got it done. And look, this is for if you're Pittsburgh right now. Look, you're racking up wins against top opponents right now, but right now Tennessee is the favorite right now. They're favored by about a touchdown. So they're thinking it's going to be a close one, over under 66.5. So definitely very offensive. And look, Tennessee, they've always been, a team that has kind of had great moments in the past, in terms of college football, but then have kind of struggled to find that success as of recently in Knoxville. But now they're going to a program that's resurging, the Pittsburgh Panthers, and with Keaton Slovis, in the backfield as the quarterback. But Ari, look here. This is a very intriguing afternoon matchup between two programs that are definitely going to be in that bottom of the top 25. What do you like in this matchup?
Yeah, we talked about last week about the Pitt West Virginia game and how crazy and great that game was. But if Pitt wants to win this game, they're gonna have to establish the run game more. Last week they didn't even average 2 yards per carry. They averaged 1.9 yards per carry against West Virginia. And, it's not going to get any easier against Tennessee in that regard. So they're going to have to find a way to establish the run game. And we saw Rodney Hammond was pretty good, 16 for 74 yards and 2 touchdowns. But the guy that they kind of wanted to seem to lead the backfield, Israel Abanikanda, only took 8 carries for 15 yards. So they're going to look to get him established, I think, early. Slovis definitely needs to be a little bit better, I feel like, to win this game for Pittsburgh. He had some good moments, some good throws last week, but I think he needs to be a little more consistent. But then also Pittsburgh had, if I remember correctly, I think they had a number of drops to their receivers, so that needs to be fixed as well. Obviously, it's tough to kind of gauge Tennessee just given the opponent, last week, but we know that they're going to be a good team this year. So, I mean, it will be a good test for the Pittsburgh defense and then for Tennessee to see how their defense fares against Keaton Slavis. But, yeah, I mean, it should be a pretty good game. I thought the spread might be a little bit closer, maybe 3 to 4 point spread. So I'm a little bit surprised to see it being 7, basically. But yeah, I mean, it should be a good test for both teams. Obviously, Pittsburgh was tested more last week, against a tougher opponent, but Tennessee was expected to be the better team, coming into the season. So it should be a good test for both teams, a good early season test.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I feel like this is a good test for Pitt, obviously competing in a kind of top-heavy ACC conference with Clemson, who doesn't look as dominant as people assume that they would be, and obviously the whole NC State debacle which happened last week. So Pitt is kind of the only real respectable team in the ACC other than Wake Forest, who now is getting Sam Hartman back. That's another story for itself. But I mean, in this ACC, I mean, look, there is talent. You have NC State, Wake Forest. I've even got about Miami, who looked pretty good against Bethune-Cookman, and then there's Pittsburgh, and I feel like Pittsburgh is going to really be a competitive. They got to stack up these wins, and now it's obviously another home game for Pitt, so they don't even have to leave again. So I feel like it's definitely going to be a high environment game. Pittsburgh's going to show out again. They showed out last week for that backyard brawl, and now they're going to show up this week. You mentioned the run game really has to be established, and I feel like that's definitely going to be one of the big things that Pitt needs to do in order to win this ball game, because obviously the way Tennessee runs their offense, I feel like Tennessee would potentially win this ball game. But, I'd love to see Pittsburgh, a team that, really, is just trying to really establish themselves in this college football debate. I love to see them get a solid win under the belt. Maybe a win over Tennessee could really boost up their resume. Maybe down the road if we're talking about New Year's Six potentially, or God forbid the college football playoff if they make it on that incredible run. But it all comes with wins like this, and if they really do establish that run game, I feel like that'll definitely be one of the big things, along with Keaton Slavis playing a lot more consistently, maybe looking toward more of the end zone, only got one total touchdown last week. So maybe looking toward the end zone a little more in terms of options, and maybe just gelling with that offense more. I feel like maybe first game jitters, obviously to kick off the season, but, maybe a lot more practice and a lot more spent time with the team can really do him some wonders as well. And so I think that's going to be one of the games. That's a sneaky game as well this coming week. But another game that is definitely going to be getting my interest is Kentucky, Florida. And that's pretty much a big battle in the SEC. I believe that's SEC East. SEC East division. And look, Florida, they came off a great win at home versus a really, really good Utah team. Anthony Richardson looked like the best quarterback last week. He was doing it all on his own. He was doing an up, down, all around. Obviously he's known for his legs, and it showed. He had over 10 carries for over 100 yards and 3 touchdowns while throwing for, just a little over 170 yards. So he can do it with his arm, but, the dual threat is definitely one of the bigger things that really elevates Anthony Richardson's game into being one of the top quarterback prospects in the draft. I mean, you have this Kentucky team who's coming in, and Will Levis, he had a pretty decent start against Miami of Ohio last week, and they got the wins. And look, it's the Will Levis versus Anthony Richardson show, and I feel like it's just the battle of which quarterback is really going to prove that that they're the better SEC East quarterback, because there's a ton of quarterbacks in that division that are very, very talented with guys like with Anthony Richardson. You have Stetson Bennett. You have Will Levis. There's so many. There's more and more and more. There's Will Rogers out of Mississippi State. There's a lot, and I feel like this is a great battle of who can really out quarterback the other. Right now, I believe Florida is about a 6-point favorite, over under about 52.5. Definitely going to be a little bit more of a defensive ball game, and Florida, defensively, they came in clutch when it really matters, and a pretty deep, solid defensive game for Kentucky last week. Ari, what are you liking about this game? And for draft value specifically, What do you like about Anthony Richardson's game that can really make him get that win this week?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a fun quarterback battle. Will Levis was supposed to be, or is supposed to be, also a top quarterback in the 2023 NFL draft. And then we're starting to see Anthony Richardson's kind of overall stock rise as well, especially, with a big win over Utah last week. His mobility is definitely a big factor. I mean, we saw the pump fake and the 2-point conversion last week against Utah. That was pretty insane. But, his durability makes him so tough to cover. We saw a number of times they do the read option where he either hand it off to the running back or take it himself, and it's so hard to kind of defend both. And so he had a really good eye of knowing when to hand it off and when to hold, take it himself. He had the big 50-yard rushing touchdown last week against Utah as well. That showed off his athleticism as well. And then we have Levis, who's more of a pocket passer than a rusher. I mean, he didn't even last week. I think he had negative rushing yards just because of some of the sacks he took, I assume. So it's a kind of different play styles, but still two top quarterbacks, kind of in the country. Before I talked about Richardson being a dark horse for the Heisman, before last week. And I think, if he can kind of keep this type of play up, I think he could definitely find his way kind of into those talks by the end of the season. But this is definitely a big time, SEC matchup early in the season between, like you said, two top ranked teams, two top quarterbacks in the country, different play styles. We saw the Florida defense step up last week. We haven't really seen the Kentucky defense. This will be their first, true test against Florida. So we'll see how they kind of defend the dual threat ability of Richardson, as well as the dynamic ability of just the offense in general for Florida. But then also, I mean, the Florida defense held Cam Rising in check last week, so we'll see if they can do that again against Levis and Kentucky's offense.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be a big question as well. And now that Florida is emerging as a contender in the West, in the East, it really gives the question, like, can Georgia even compete with them? Because, if they limit, a Cam Rising, what if they can limit, a Will Levis or a Stetson Bennett or, whoever the quarterback battle is. So that's definitely going to be a game I'm watching this weekend. I feel like Florida, with how Anthony Richardson has been playing so far, I feel like definitely a lot of momentum on him could really drive this team. And it's another home game, so it's in the Swamp, another challenging place for any quarterback to play. We saw that last week with Cam Rising, and I feel like that may continue into this week with Will Levis of Kentucky. So I definitely think that's going to be one of the games I'm watching, just in terms of, in terms of quarterback battle, but just in terms of, seeing how that environment is and how it really gets to Will Levis. Because, I mean, it's a very, very high road environment. Obviously, the Swamp is, but I definitely think that's going to be one of the bigger games as well this week. Heading into the night on Saturday, we also have USC versus Stanford. And yes, this is an all Pac-12 one, but this is interesting. USC only a 9-point favorite. And, USC kind of the now forefront leaders of the Pac-12 after both Oregon and Utah take bad loss. Well, not bad loss for Utah, but heartbreaking loss for Utah, and then a horrible loss for Oregon. USC is kind of now the forefront, the only team that in the top 25 for the Pac-12 that has a win right now. And, it's looking like USC could potentially be the forefront of this conference right here. And after their win against Rice, and, we've always talked about how many stars are on that team, with Lincoln Riley being the head coach now, and Caleb Williams, the transfer quarterback, and Jordan Addison, the transfer wide receiver, and just all the 5 stars, you name it, in USC. To see him only be an 8-point favorite, I think it's 9. Yeah, 9-point favorite against a Stanford team that, I mean, has never really elevated their game past 6-6 since the Andrew Luck and Christian McCaffrey era back in the 2016-2015 seasons. But yeah, they do have a pretty solid running back in EJ Smith, the junior, and I feel like we've seen Tanner McKee be so inconsistent all year. Is this a trap game for USC, Ari? What do you think? Does Vegas think it's more of a trap game, or for USC, obviously, is it just, they're really underrated right now and they haven't really reached their top potential yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think early in the season, kind of lines are always tough just because you don't have much to go off of with these teams other than, talent on the field, talent on paper. I definitely do agree that the line seems a little bit short. I thought it'd be closer to like 12 to 14, kind of in favor of USC. I mean, it is right. It's in Stanford. Maybe that's nothing to do with it. Although they're both in California, so that's a huge difference. I mean, it's normally a rivalry, but Stanford has, like you said, Stanford hasn't really been up that level, in recent seasons. But yeah, I think this is the game that USC has to kind of make their mark on, as the leaders of the Pac-12 after Oregon got absolutely demolished last week. And then, Utah, like you said, it wasn't a bad loss in that environment on the road. But this is definitely a chance for USC that they need to. I think they need a double-digit win in this game to kind of put their foot on, on the Pac-12 of them being at the top. I mean, I still like Utah a lot. I think that they'll bounce back from that loss. But yeah, I mean, I agree that USC kind of needs to win this game by double digits to kind of certify themselves, I guess I should say, at the top, either at the top or top two of the Pac-12.
Yeah, I feel like for USC, I feel like it's not like a must win, but to really assert yourself as the best team in the Pac-12, you definitely need to have this win against a Pac-12 opponent, obviously. And, for USC, just, a moral, like a good win for them, because obviously they're going to have, some tough competition down the road. We only know they got to play Utah this year, so that's already a hard game that's on their schedule. They got to play Notre Dame, and I believe that's in South Bend this year, which is already going to be tough. And it's in California this year. But they still got to play UCLA. That's a rivalry game. They still got to play, obviously, Arizona, and now Arizona, they have a resurging offense. It's not an easy schedule, and you got to start out early with some wins here. And I feel like if USC wants to run the table, I think they can. Depending on, how the season goes with Caleb Williams and just how many stars are on that offense, you really just can't tell, like, how can this team not run the table? And I feel like if USC really wants to make themselves known, I feel like this is the season too. But then again, with Stanford, there's always the thing about the Pac-12 is everyone beats up on each other. And you have this Stanford team who, yes, is 1-0, but coming off a win against Colgate, and don't really have any star names to really bring to their offense other than EJ Smith, the back. It's maybe it's a trap game, and that's why I feel like potentially USC could get maybe too cocky after 1 week and kind of stutter or falter against a Stanford team that's not really expected to be making any big moves within the Pac-12 this year. And so that could definitely be a trap game as well. But then again, obviously you mentioned early lines are destined to change throughout the week. And, the line will probably change as we get closer and closer to Saturday since it's a few days away. But I feel like if USC is going to really be a contender this year, they have to run the table. And right now they're making it not making it, but Utah and Oregon losing last week kind of makes it easier for this USC team to really run the table and have a successful season in the Pac-12 before they depart for the Big Ten. So that's definitely a game to watch as well on Saturday. I got two more for you. Another one that this is a non-conference one, but involves the Pac-12. Your rival school, ASU, the Arizona State Sun Devils. They are traveling to Oklahoma State to play Oklahoma State in, I believe. Oh my God, where's OK State's campus? I know this. Stillwater. Yeah, that I forgot the name. Yeah, they're traveling to Stillwater. Oklahoma State opens up at an 11-point favorite. Look, we saw OK State last week against a really, really bad Central Michigan team give up 48 points, only winning by 14. But a second half where they kind of just take their foot off the gas and allowed the Central Michigan team to really catch up and almost win this. Ari, when you see this line here, only 11 points, obviously ASU coming off a win against Northern Arizona, 40-3, but at home. I feel like this could be upset trouble for a OK State team that is really, really heavily dependent on their offense. But then again, at the same time, the offense of ASU is not their best thing. That's not their their main force. It's their defense that really is going to be driving them to these wins. So, I mean, obviously something's going to have to give. Do you think it's going to be the Oklahoma State defense first or the ASU offense? Which one is going to give up first? Personally, I think this offense for Oklahoma State is just way too dangerous. We've seen it too many times. They score so many points. But do you think ASU potentially may have a comeback in the works or, make this game a little more competitive than on paper than it should be?
Yeah, I don't really think so. I think even though ASU, they crushed Northern Arizona as you would expect, last week, I still wasn't impressed at all by Emory Jones and, that offense. I mean, the running game the running game did well, average over 5 yards per carry, but, again, grain of salt against NAU. Oklahoma State's defense, like we talked about, isn't great, but I see Spencer Sanders having just another huge offensive game against this ASU defense, and I just don't think, I can't see this ASU offense putting up, 40 plus points like we saw last week from, it was Central Michigan, right, that played Oklahoma State. I just don't see ASU having the firepower to come even close to keeping up with the Oklahoma State offense, especially in Oklahoma State, at their school in that environment. I think Oklahoma State wins pretty easily by 15 plus.
Yeah, I definitely gotta agree with you there. I feel like Oklahoma State, yes, Emory Jones, the transfer, I feel like he had, a decent game, but it's against a bad Northern Arizona team. And this Oklahoma State team, obviously their offense, Spencer Sanders, the names on that offense. Spencer Sanders, dark horse with the Heisman this year, I believe. We've seen what he can do. And he's playing good. He's playing good quarterback position, right? He's playing the ball. He's playing good quarterback right now. And I feel like the momentum of a week 1 win is definitely going to carry for them into week 2, especially at home in Stillwater. I feel like, yes, the Arizona defense is good, but they can't. I don't think they're going to be able to stop a high potent offense like
Arizona State.
Yeah, I don't think Arizona State's defense, is really going to stop a high potent offense in Oklahoma State. But Arizona State, they do have a good rushing offense, as you mentioned. But I feel like the OK State offense will be way too much for them. And I do have Oklahoma State winning. I believe the over-under right now is set at 58. And I feel like Oklahoma State will almost cash out in the first half again. So with just how high energy their offense is, and Spencer Sanders loving to find that deep ball connection, or just methodically moving down the field. So yeah, but that's definitely going to game I'm going to watch. Would love to see the Pac-12 win, but I feel like this one is a little bit too mighty of a high climb to cash in. And then finally, one of the more intriguing matchups of week 1, personally, BYU and Baylor. And this, it's a top 25 matchup, Ari. Look, Baylor, they played Albany, for God's sake. That they come on now. That I don't think we should really count that. But, Baylor, they've had a lot of success throughout these past seasons, and now Charlie Brewer, the former quarterback, left, and they have Blake Shapen, the sophomore. He's inserted himself. He had a decent game last week. He only had a few incompletions. He threw 214 yards, 2 touchdowns, obviously against a bad Albany team. And, BYU had a good road win for their program as well on the road in South Florida. Obviously, they're playing non-conference right now, but next year, this is a conference matchup between these two, Baylor and BYU. And then decent game for Jaron Hall, the quarterback for the BYU Cougars, the junior. He 25 of 32, 261 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception for him on the day. Right now, the line saying BYU is a 3.5-point favorite. It's going to be a very close matchup. These two last year, this was one of the bigger games that came down to the wire. I believe it was week 4 last year where BYU almost had the win. against BYU on the road, but it was a fun game to watch as well. But now this is in Provo, and Provo, they can get loud over there, and it's a night game, and I feel like this could definitely be a trap game for a Baylor team that's really trying to contend in the Big 12. Number 9 in the country. They definitely have a good defense, and I feel like that's what they're going to have to rely on, both teams. And then you have BYU's run game, which is ridiculous right now. Shout out to Christopher Brooks, the senior running back. He is really filling Tyler Algiers. He's filling his shoes pretty well with his first game, 135 yards on the ground and a touchdown, including a 52-yard score. So I feel like if he breaks up for one of those long runs again, it's going to be game over for Baylor. All right, I don't know if you know a lot about these two teams. What do you like in this top 25 matchup?
Yeah, man, I know it's at BYU, but I'm a little shocked to see them like this big of a favorite. I thought it might be like even, or even like Baylor, like a 1 point, 2 point favorite. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely not an easy place to play. At BYU, obviously it's tough to gauge both teams after week 1 against, not as good opponents. And so this will be, another good early test for both teams. I know Baylor's defense is pretty good. And then BYU's, I think most of their offense, is back. You mentioned the running game. They averaged over 8 yards per carry last week on the ground. So I think that would be a big, focal point for them again, is to establish the run game against Baylor. Obviously, it'll be a tougher test for both teams after last week, against better opponents. But I don't know, I'm leaning towards Baylor in this one, despite being, a truer game at BYU. I think the defense is going to step up enough to hold the run game, enough to let the offense do just enough. But I think it should be a pretty close game.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to be a very, very close game as well. I feel like BYU, it's definitely going to be a great story for a BYU team. Obviously their final year as a non-conference, to get a big win. But for Baylor team who is trying to contend at the top of the Big 12, with Oklahoma and Oklahoma State as well, and potentially Texas if they have this huge win at home. We'll see how that goes. I feel like Baylor, obviously, this is a big game for them. It's going to be a very, very electric environment, I feel like, for sure, going to Provo. I was a little shocked as well at this money line. I feel like they're really, really heavily on BYU just because of their run game as well. But Baylor has some dogs, and I feel like if their defense plays to the level that their defense had played last week, I feel like it's going to be a really, really hard day for Jaren Hall and that offense to really produce anything. Obviously, they were not really heavily reliant on that on the run game, but that a lot of pieces returning definitely does help them in the future for this game. So I feel like this is definitely going to be maybe coming to a last-second field goal, or coming down to the wire as well. I feel that this game could definitely do that. The game over/under is 53.5, so not the highest scoring, and so definitely Vegas knows that these two defenses are a lot more stout and definitely a lot better this year. So I feel like that's going to transition to the game, but I feel like it's going to be a very close game to potentially coming down to the wire. I'd love to see BYU get a solid win under the belt, maybe make a run at the. I mean, not going to say run at the college football playoff, but maybe a run into like a good New Year's Six bowl game. Obviously, BYU has kind of had the rough end of the stick. They've always been a team that's been in the top 25. Maybe trying to make a deep run, but then they have one bad loss and they're going to like the LA Bowl, or some ridiculous bowl in the middle of the week that no one's going to watch because that's just kind of how it is in non-conference. But maybe a big run for BYU team is in the works this year, but we'll see. That's definitely a good game to watch. Ari, I don't know if you have any games out, if you have any games that you want to note that are happening this weekend, but those are kind of my top games heading into this weekend.
I mean, I'll just touch on the Arizona game, of course. Both teams, Mississippi State, SEC opponent coming to Tucson. Both schools coming off big opening week wins over San Diego State, and I believe Memphis is who Mississippi State beat. A lot for Arizona, it would be interesting because a lot different style of play. They were facing last week Braxton Burmeister of San Diego State, who's more of a dual threat. And then now you have Will Rogers, who's more of a pocket passer. You have Mike Leach, who obviously you're familiar with. You know his offense is. It's the same no matter where he's at, air raid, pass heavy. And so it's going to be a lot different of a test for the Arizona defense. Mississippi State, interesting. It opened up as a 6.5-point favorite, and now it's all the way up to 10.5, 11. So all the money's on Mississippi State. It'll be interesting because I watched some interviews with some of the Mississippi State players, and a lot of them have never been to Arizona. And so playing in that dry heat will definitely be a new, experience for a lot of them. So that would be kind of one factor to kind of keep an eye on. Over under 60, it's going to be a high scoring game. So it's going to be a good test for Arizona because, since San Diego State crushed them last year, and so it's good to see them get a pretty convincing win over them last week. But Mississippi State, out of the SEC is going to be a different, a lot more physical, a lot just bigger overall of the team, just being an SEC school. And so it's going to be a really, really good test for the Arizona offense. I think the offense can keep up with Mississippi State offense. So I do think it's going to come down to the fourth quarter. I'm obviously, I'm from Arizona, so I'm a little bit biased, but I am surprised to see the spread this big in the double digits. I thought when it opened at like 6 to 7 points, I thought would be about where it would be. So I'm a little bit surprised to see the big jump, but clearly people are gonna favor SEC over Pac-12 schools. That's just the way it is. This could be a good way for Arizona to kind of leave their mark. Taking an SEC school, even if let's say they lose, but it's a close game to the last possession, I think that could be good. But it's going to be a good test either way for Arizona to see kind of where they're at because, they're kind of taking a turn after winning one game the last 2 years. They're kind of taking a turn with a completely different roster than what they had last year. It's like 70% new players, basically. So it's a completely new team. But obviously, it's just one win that they've had, so you can only take so much from that. So this is definitely going to be a good test in front of what should hopefully be a good crowd, at Arizona this weekend. So.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I even forgot about that game, honestly, but no disrespect, but yes, I feel like this Mississippi State Arizona game is definitely going to be one that's very slept on. You mentioned Mike Leach, and I've known him for his WSU days, but his air raid offense, what he does, he just, he loves that pocket passer, loving that, just sit in the pocket, throw the ball cleanly. And I feel like that's what Will Rogers has transformed into, in this time at Mississippi State. And, it's definitely going to just be a battle of, Will Rogers versus how that Arizona offense will be. And you mentioned the weather. I feel like that will play a role, although I think the game is like late at like 8 o'clock at night. So I feel like that's not going to play as big of a role as it should. If it was like a 1 p.m. game, it'd be like 110, but still very, very dry heat as well coming from Mississippi State, where it's
I feel like it's kind of isn't it kind of dry in the South, or I guess it depends on where you're at, but I guess it's different.
Yeah, I mean it's different where you go. Obviously, a lot more like southern places like Florida, Georgia, Alabama, a lot more humid. Obviously Tennessee, so definitely a lot more humidity there. But definitely could play a role as well. But I liked what I saw last week from that Arizona offense. Obviously. Former Wazoo quarterback Jada Laura, had a pretty impressive game. So, I can't lie.
But there's going to be a lot tougher of a test this week. So, we saw the Arizona defense get to Burmeister really, really often last week. So that's going to be a big focal point. It's putting pressure on Rogers because the more time he has in the pocket, you're can only do so much. They had, I think, 4 pass catchers catch 5+ passes from Mississippi State last week. So he does a really good job of spreading the ball around. They don't really have like one dominant receiver. So they're going to need to put pressure on Rogers. And then for Arizona offensively, Jacob Cowing erupted last week, 150 yards, 3 touchdowns. So it's going to be interesting to see how Mississippi State kind of defends him because if they put more attention on him, that opens up the rest of the field. You have a 5-star freshman receiver, Tatairo McMillan, who caught touchdown last week for Arizona. And then you had Dorian Singer catch, I think, 6 passes last week as well, who was a walk-on last year who kind of took a role late in the season. So Arizona this is probably the deepest receiver core they've had in quite some time. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Mississippi State secondary defends them. But at the same time, their defensive line is really solid as well. So it's going to be key for the Arizona offensive line to do as much as they can to give Delora time in the pocket as well.
Yeah. I definitely will say that I'm going to definitely tune into that game. I would love to see how this Arizona team looks, with a really big challenge coming their way with Mississippi State. Kind of you mentioned a whole different offensive switch up in terms of the dynamic flow between San Diego State and Mississippi State. But that's definitely going to be a game I'm watching next week as well in terms of the talent that is definitely coming out, because you mentioned pretty much a whole new team for that Arizona offense, and just how it looks. It's definitely going to be something I'm really going to be watching and keeping track of to see how they really look. And you mentioned it, Arizona, a team that's been always at the bottom of the Pac-12 in terms of football for the past couple of seasons, now looking for a resurgence. So definitely going to be something to note. But Ari, do you have anything else you want to say real quick?
No, yeah, it should be another fun weekend of college football. And then I think tomorrow we'll do a Thursday night football preview show for the Rams-Bills game. So we'll talk a lot more NFL on that. I think tomorrow we'll kind of run through the whole week 1 slate. Normally we'll do that Friday, but I think this week we'll do that tomorrow. So yeah, just stay tuned for that.
Yeah, tomorrow, obviously, the beginning of the NFL season. It's finally back, guys. NFL is finally back. We get to watch football every Sunday until February. So we're going to make our season predictions as well as Super Bowl predictions tomorrow before the season officially starts. Tune into that. That's going to be right before Thursday Night Football. And then Friday, the next day after that, we're going to be doing our starts and sits for all the fantasy football people out there, who to start in terms of week 1, helping and going into the weekend, obviously. There are still some, linger questions on injuries like Chris Godwin, Zach Ertz, some of those people who have been, kind of in and out of lineups, definitely going to be getting some updates as we get closer and closer into Saturday, and as well as Sunday, along with just matchup wise, who looks best against who in terms of, setting your fantasy football lineups for the first weekend. But this has been an episode of AKP Sports Talk. I'm Korea. That's Ari. Thank you guys for tuning in. And we'll see you guys tomorrow for the beginning of the 2022-2023 NFL season.